In the previous section, we covered access control models such as DAC, MAC, RBAC, and ABAC, which are tactical or technical implementations. All of these deal with various types of permission. But here's the key question. Who defines these permissions? And more importantly, who picks the access control model? All of these models, for example, the RBAC, the ABAC, all of these are technical controls and they sit within a much broader strategy. So governance, risk, and compliance basically defines the policies which govern these decisions. Like who will have what permissions, what access control model will we use, what will be security controls put in place. You would be surprised to know that some of the biggest breaches in history happened not because of technical failures, but because of poor decisions, policies that were missing, or lack of accountability. And governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC, covers exactly those concepts. Moreover, if you go to websites like Glassdoor, Indeed, and LinkedIn, there are thousands of GRC related roles. Many don't require deep technical skills, making it a great entry point into cybersecurity. So first, let's formally define GRC. Personally, I really like the definition given by IBM, which says GRC is an organizational strategy to manage governance and risks while maintaining compliance with industry and government regulations. It's a very precise definition. So what is it? It's basically an organizational strategy. And what does it help us achieve? It helps us manage governance and risks while maintaining compliance with industry and government regulations. As we're going to discuss later on, governance basically relates to establishing clear policies, roles, and responsibilities. Risks are basically anything that can go wrong and which could cause reputational or financial damage to the organization. And compliance refers to industry or government regulations such as HIPAA or GDPR with which an organization needs to comply to. So overall, GRC is a big area in cybersecurity and definitely warrants a whole dedicated section, which is the current one. Let's discuss each of these concepts in detail. So the first one that we're going to discuss is governance. So governance defines the policies and standards that manage information security of an organization. If you recall, we already discussed things like policies and standards at the start of the course where we were establishing the foundations. I'm going to revisit that slide in a minute. So governance ensures that cybersecurity aligns with business strategy. This is an important point because in a lot of use cases in real life, cybersecurity sometimes conflicts with business strategy. Because in some instances, balancing the business strategy versus being more secure requires a delicate balance. And this is something interesting that we're going to discuss throughout this section. Moreover, governance defines the roles, responsibilities, and accountability in a very clear and streamlined manner. Let me give you a refresher on policies, standards, and procedures. So at the top level, we have policies. So policies are sort of like the umbrella concept or the overarching strategies which we implement in an organization. So policies are always organization wide. They're very high level and broad scoped. So for example, a policy can be to ensure all employees use the organization's technology resources responsibly, securely, and legally. So it's very broad. And usually policies are defined for long term and they define the responsibilities for management and users. So policies, very high level, very broad. The next level are standards. So what are standards? Standards are rules to achieve the intent of the policy. So remember, policy is very high level. Then you have to define rules to basically cover several different areas. Think of it like this is your sort of like big goal, and then you're defining your objectives within that goal. And what are procedures? Procedures are specific steps. For example, a procedure could be train employees and ensure consistency in security related business processes. So policies define very high level. At medium level, we have standards, and then procedures are basically concrete steps, actionable steps. So you can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it is going to achieve certain things. Let me give you a very simple example to refresh the concept. Let's say your policy is that employees are allowed to work from home up to 2 days per week. provided productivity and communication standards are maintained. So in order to realize this policy, we need some standards. So for example, one standard could be the days that you pick for work from home, they need to be pre-approved by your manager. Another standard could be sensitive company data must be accessed only through a VPN and through a corporate provided laptop. So these are standards. They define the policy in a bit more detail. They flesh out the policies. And finally, what could be an example of a procedure? It could be how to request a work from home day. Log into the company's HR portal, navigate to the leave section, submit a work from home request at least 24 hours in advance or 48 hours in advance, wait for manager approval on the work from home day, sign into the attendance system by 9 a.m. and so on. So you see, we are moving from very high level to very concrete steps. Okay, so we just finished discussing governance, which are basically policies and standards that maintain information security, and they ensure that cybersecurity aligns with business strategy and the roles and responsibilities are defined. The next is risk. So what's risk? Risk is basically anything that can go wrong. In the context of GRC, risk refers to risk management. So basically you need processes for identifying and assessing threats. Threats could be internal, they could be external. Threats could be financial, they could be cybersecurity related. So all of those covered by risk management. So example of a risk could be disruption of critical business operations due to a ransomware attack. So you need to have processes for identifying these risks in advance and assessing those threats. Risk management also involves identifying gaps and proactively minimizing these risks. And it also includes vulnerability management. Vulnerability, as we discussed before, is any weakness in your system or software that can be exploited by an insider or an outsider threat in order to gain privileged access and cause damage. And finally, we'll discuss compliance. What's compliance? Compliance are basically industry standards. And when you are compliant, it means that your organization is adhering to laws and regulations. So for example, if you deal with the data of European Union citizens, then you need to comply to GDPR or Global Data Protection Directive. If you're dealing with healthcare information, then you need to comply with HIPAA. And we've already discussed these standards in the foundations section. Here, we're going to delve in a bit more detail. As part of compliance, it is your responsibility to implement controls to make sure compliance is met. And a big part of GRC is basically identifying gaps and then implementing controls. And there are so many different standards for implementing controls. There are complete frameworks which define what type of controls can you put in place if you want your organization covered. So this was a very high level overview of what is governance, risk and compliance and why GRC is so important in cybersecurity.